Positive change will only occur when there is a true collaborative grassroots advocacy movement and collaboration between the public and private sectors that makes autism the legislative priority that it needs to be.
And I've seen it personally both inside the legislature at the highest level when I worked in the Senate, and now for the last 21 years outside as a lobbyist who represents the developmental disabilities community and autism organizations. That if you're not there doing grassroots day, meeting legislators, keeping the issues, trust me, there are thousands of other organizations out there who are doing that, and you quickly become a memory and not forcing people to confront what, again, is the #1 public health crisis in our country.
If more parents do not get involved in legislative advocacy, we're simply not going to see the changes that need to occur.
And we're all stressed. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, you know, families of children with autism, and studies have been done about just how hard it is to raise a child with autism, and we all, you know, are under siege every day.
So if we had just a small percentage of parents that redirected 1% of the time that they spend on social media to actual legislative advocacy, we would see positive policy change.
We can only get the government that we deserve if we inform our legislators on what's needed.
And to be able to cobble together some time and some effort to advocate for programs that help our kids is hard, it's tough, but it has to be done or nothing's going to change.
How important is it for parents and self-advocates to make legislative advocacy a priority? It's just well known that many people are they're intimidated by it. Yeah. I mean, you're a nice guy. I'm not intimidated by you. You know,
I can be very intimidated.
You know, I know, but seriously, I've talked to a lot of parents, and they're just like they'll talk tough on social media, but at the end of the day, they will not go in and meet with their elected officials.
Every advancement in policy for those living with disabilities has come because a parent of a child has been the advocate. And no one is going to advocate for your child better than you are. And I understand the steep slope. I understand the intimidating factor of having to do that. And it's unfortunate that we have to. But in order to get people who don't understand or have 1,000 priorities to focus in on the real need here, we have to be those advocates, because if we're not, you cannot be confident that someone else is going to be.
You know, at the end of the day, we're all human, and legislators are really no different. They deal with the day-to-day struggles. While maybe it's not autism, some of them may have somebody else who's ill in their family and they've had some experience there. And so most legislators I have found are very compassionate and kind people when they have the time to really understand your issue.
I remember as a state assemblyman arguing for the expansion of insurance service for those living on the spectrum, and I just told my story. And I think more of us need to do that. I mean, I've often hesitated to be the legislator that advocated for something because it's personal to me. But in this line of work, in this realm or this area of service, we need more people to stand up regardless of their background and say, this is my story and this is why it's valuable.
Families are really so important in the advocacy. Things change because of family involvement. Our system here in California would have never happened unless families of people with children with developmental disabilities got together in the late 1960s and said, we can't do this anymore. We have two options as parents back in the all the way up to the late 1960s. Either keeping our kid at home, and in fact in California you couldn't even send a child with autism to public school until 1972. So you had your child at home, no supports, no education, nothing, or get on a waiting list to have your child institutionalized in one of the large state developmental centers. So those families got together and they changed the world. They created the Lanterman Act here in our state, which now serves over 300,000 individuals and their families with autism, cerebral palsy, epilepsy, and intellectual disabilities.
It is important to have one-on-one contact. They spend a lot of time advocating for their kids, whether it be with teachers, whether it be with school officials, whether it be with people who provide services. It's the same skill. It's going to one of your neighbors who happens to have been elected to office and telling that neighbor, here's the problem I have. I need you to help me fix it. You have the tools of government at your disposal. Direct some of them this way.
A lot of autism advocates have a different view. They don't always agree with one another, so there's often infighting. Can you explain how important it is for them to try to come to mutually agreed positions ahead of time before going into legislative offices, so that when they go in, they don't have a legislator saying, hey, I got 3 different autism groups who want 3 different things. I can't help them. They throw their hands up.
And by the way, that's the way it generally happens with many other issues. But here you could have 20, 30, 40, 50 people around the room, all different personalities, come from different walks of life in this state. And we know that there's a social and economic difference in every avenue of this state. When they came to my office, we said to them, we have this one opportunity to do something that's right for your family. Right now, you are not getting insurance reimbursement for the diagnosed treatment and therapy. All of you have different views on how to do this. We have a piece of legislation with so many co-sponsors in the Senate. We have an assembly partner who was terrific, who had the support in the House, in the Assembly. Let's join together, put all the advocacy groups together for one common cause and one common goal. And it worked. We made them put their differences aside and said, let's start with this. If we have to build in later years, we'll do that. But we need to get this legislation passed. We need to get it signed into law. And we need to ensure that you're not going to be continually going into your pocket for $50, $60, $70, $80,000 of your own money to provide the care that you want to provide to your child or your loved one.
I think, first of all, it's important for parents to meet with their legislators back home in their district, where the legislators have more time and, an opportunity to really have a more casual and intimate conversation with them. So I do encourage parents to make those appointments back home in their district when they're not in session. And I think the first thing that they need to do is just sort of educate the lawmaker on what their day-to-day life is like and what their struggles are.
You don't have to always travel to the state capitol. Every legislator has a district office where you can meet them in their district.
I would say, having spent years teaching parents about how to be an effective advocate, that their power is in their story and sharing their story. And every year when budget time comes around, I tell them, don't just, send off a cut and paste email. Contact your legislator and tell them what funding for a particular program would mean for your child.
There are many issues that impact families and people with autism, but the way you get that elevated is through organization and passion and basically just really hard work.
I always caution people that advocacy isn't a one and done. People who flood into the State House once a year with their list of demands aren't going to get the same reception as someone who takes the time to get to know their House member, their senator, meet them perhaps for coffee, particularly out in the district. Every one of us has office hours. People will agree to meet you at any coffee shop. Sit down, get to know the person in an unrushed and undisturbed situation, and really share your story and emphasize to the legislator that you can be a source of information for them.
Put yourself in an elected official's shoes for a moment. Here's someone who's responsible, regardless of what state or what legislature or what responsibility, all the way down from city council, all the way up to the President of the United States. The myriad of important issues that they have to deal with and make decisions on. They seek out information. They want to know what positions, what people think about these issues. And you have to work as an advocate to get your issue elevated above all others. And that's the challenge.
One of my favorite stories is that the current Speaker of the House in Massachusetts, Bob DeLeo, was the Ways and Means Chair. And I tried to pass something in the budget, and he didn't fully understand that it was a spectrum disorder. And so he didn't want to do it. And so I asked him if I could have my son and 10 of his classmates come in from his out-of-district school. And he had lunch with them for over an hour. And he saw in that amount of time the incredible richness of thought, the strengths, and he saw the glaring challenges. And then he began to understand that this was a spectrum disorder. From that point forward, I would say, anything that I tried to do in legislation with regards to autism, he was on board. And that's critical, because then you have someone who you've got here, right? You've got his heart, and then you are being trusted as the leader. And so, because it's not just having great ideas and policy, it's getting it passed and getting it funded.
One of the things that's very troubling is that there is no full-time lobbyist in Washington on autism issues.
I mean, it's quite shocking that we don't, to be quite honest, because when you think about conditions such as Alzheimer's or ALS or other medical conditions that are impacting many people, they do usually have representation in DC and across the states.
It is criminal if there's not a voice full-time there in Washington advocating for our kids.
Those of us who've been in the process understand the good that a lobbyist can do and what they can achieve, and how sometimes the impact a lobbyist can have can translate into policies which could serve thousands.